The morning felt different from the very beginning. I woke up before my alarm, nerves already tightening beneath my skin. As I moved through the quiet house, my mind replayed the details of my resume, the questions I might be asked, the words I had rehearsed in my head the night before. The kitchen was filled with the familiar scent of coffee, but even that felt more like a prop in someone else's morning than an anchor for my own. I stood in front of the closet, running my hands across fabrics, weighing the silent messages each shirt might send. I wanted to look capable, but not cold, approachable, but not desperate. In the end, I chose a soft blue blouse and simple dark jeans, hoping to strike the right balance between confidence and humility. On the drive, I caught glimpses of myself in the rearview mirror, searching for some trace of excitement beneath the cautious optimism in my eyes. The city blurred past my window, streets and storefronts flashing by, each one reminding me that the world was moving forward, whether I claimed a place in it or not. I practiced steady breathing at stoplights, forcing myself to remember why I was doing this, not just for a paycheck, but for something I couldn't name, a hope that had started to whisper inside me when I realized how small my days had become. Arriving at the office, I hesitated at the entrance, feeling the old patterns trying to reassert themselves, the urge to turn back, to apologize for wasting anyone's time, to shrink away from the possibility of being truly seen. But I pushed forward, checking in with the receptionist and sitting down in the waiting area, fingers curled tightly around the handle of my purse. The air smelled faintly of fresh paint and coffee, a reminder that change was always happening somewhere, even if I couldn't always feel it inside myself. When she entered the room, something in the atmosphere shifted. I noticed her immediately, her posture, the way she moved with purpose, the ease in her gaze. She looked at me directly, not unkindly, but with a steady, focused attention that made me sit up straighter. My heart thudded in my chest, not from fear, but from a flicker of anticipation I hadn't felt in a long time. She introduced herself and gestured for me to follow her down a short hallway lined with framed photographs and motivational quotes. I listened to the sound of my own steps, measured and careful, each one a small act of determination. Inside the interview room, the air felt dense with possibility. Papers were neatly stacked on the desk, a glass of water sat untouched beside a notepad. I took a seat and arranged my hands in my lap, fighting the urge to fidget. I answered her questions thoughtfully, drawing on years of experience, but all the while I was aware of a new energy weaving through the conversation. There was a sense of being evaluated, yes, but not judged. More like she was watching to see who I really was beneath the practiced answers. For the first time in years, I wondered what she might see. As the interview progressed, I felt my initial anxiety give way to a subtle sense of curiosity. Her questions sometimes surprised me, nudging me to think about myself in ways I hadn't considered. I realized I wanted her to see me as capable, but also as someone still capable of becoming. There was something liberating in that possibility. By the end of our time together, I felt lighter, as if I had left some of my old caution behind in that chair. When I stood to leave, I caught a glimpse of myself reflected in the glass of a framed photograph on the wall. My posture was different, shoulders back, chin lifted just slightly. I almost didn't recognize the woman staring back at me, but for the first time in a long time, I wanted to get to know her. She asked if I would be willing to participate in a creative assessment, something that would let me show my individuality and problem-solving skills beyond the usual questions. I nodded, trying to hide the nervous energy fluttering just beneath my skin. She explained the exercise in a calm, measured voice, giving just enough detail for me to understand the task, but leaving enough ambiguity to test my ability to improvise and adapt. My mind raced with possibilities, each one colliding with the next in a jumble of uncertainty and hope. I could feel my pulse quicken as she led me down another hallway, past empty offices and closed doors, into a room that felt separate from the rest of the building, as if set aside for moments that were meant to break routine. Inside, the space was minimal, bare walls, a large window letting in diffuse, almost silvery daylight, a single table and 2 chairs. The quiet pressed in around me, amplifying every small sound, every breath. She stood to the side, her arms folded loosely, watching without the weight of expectation, but with an unmistakable attentiveness. She invited me to begin when I was ready, her voice low and even, neither encouraging nor discouraging, just present. I hesitated for a moment, trying to steady my hands, feeling the full weight of being observed but not judged. There was something different in the air, an unspoken challenge, a sense that I could be more than my practiced answers if I was willing to risk it. I started by talking through my process out loud, explaining how I would approach the task, what factors I would consider, where I might begin. But even as I spoke, I realized that words alone wouldn't be enough to satisfy what the moment was really asking of me. My instinct was to retreat to safety, to perform the exercise in a way that wouldn't draw attention or reveal too much. But the look in her eyes told me that safety wasn't what she was looking for. She was searching for something unguarded, something real. With a deep breath, I pushed myself to go further, to cross a line I had always drawn between myself and the unknown. I let my body move, gesturing with my hands, stepping away from the table to physically embody the ideas I was describing. At first, I felt self-conscious, painfully aware of how exposed I must have seemed. But as I continued, something shifted. My movements became more fluid, my words more confident, my presence in the room undeniable. The energy between us grew charged, not tense, but awake, as if we were both waiting to see what would happen if I truly let myself be seen. She didn't interrupt, didn't break the spell, simply stood in that space and allowed me to fill it with something I hadn't felt in years, a willingness to risk being different, to surprise even myself. I finished the exercise not with a flourish, but with a quiet certainty that I had done something honest, something that might change the way I saw myself. I looked at her, searching for any hint of approval or disappointment, but her expression remained open, almost enigmatic. I realized then that this moment wasn't about passing or failing. It was about giving myself permission to step beyond the limits I had always accepted as necessary. As I left the room, my heart was pounding, but beneath the anxiety there was something else, something fierce and unexpected, a sense of pride, and the thrill of having tested the boundaries of who I might become. The room was quiet after the exercise, the silence settling between us like a layer of warmth and possibility. I could feel my pulse in my throat, in my wrists, in the tips of my fingers. The sunlight coming through the window caught the dust in the air, turning it into shimmering threads that seemed to suspend the moment in something both fragile and important. I stood near the table, unsure of where I put my hands, aware that my body was no longer just a vessel for nerves, but something alive, electric, undeniably present. She watched me with a calm that felt deliberate, not just polite interest, but genuine attention that made every inch of my skin hypersensitive. The distance between us felt charged, as if the whole room was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. I found myself reaching for the edge of the table, grounding myself as I tried to steady the tremor running through me. I realized then how much I craved to be truly seen, not as a candidate, not as a wife or mother or someone defined by years of quiet routine, but as myself, stripped of explanation, worthy of interest simply by existing. I lifted my chin, drawing a slow breath, letting my eyes meet hers. For a moment, everything else faded away. The years, the layers, the silent agreements I'd made with myself about what was possible. I saw in her gaze an invitation, a kind of encouragement that didn't need to be spoken. She stepped closer, not enough to be inappropriate, but enough for me to feel her presence more keenly. The air felt different around her, warm and expectant. I noticed the way her shadow joined mine on the floor, the subtle way her posture mirrored the opening in my own. It was as if our bodies were communicating in a language that needed no words. I became acutely aware of my breathing, the way my chest lifted with each inhale, the subtle tightening of my stomach, the faint dampness of my palms. My mind raced with reasons to step back, to laugh it off, to shield myself with another layer of professionalism, but my body resisted, holding still. My heart hammered as she reached out, not abruptly, not with any hint of demand, but gently, her fingertips pausing a breath away from my arm. She waited, letting me choose. The consent was silent, mutual, felt rather than spoken. I didn't move away. Her fingers brushed my forearm, light and tentative, as if she were testing the current between us. The sensation rippled through me, sharp and bright. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the warmth of her skin seep into mine, letting go of everything I thought I should feel or fear. My shoulders dropped, the tension in my jaw faded, replaced by a slow, rolling wave of relief and anticipation. Her touch wasn't demanding, wasn't possessive. It was simply present, a statement that I was here, that she saw me, that something in me was still capable of waking. She withdrew her hand after a moment, but the contact lingered, as if the air itself remembered. I caught her gaze again, and in that exchange was a promise, a question, a secret I had never dared to voice. I felt myself smiling, small and genuine, the kind that comes when you know a line has been crossed, but nothing terrible has happened. Instead, something true has begun. I left the room carrying her touch with me, my skin alive, my senses sharpened, the boundaries I'd built over years now soft and uncertain. The world outside felt the same, but I was not. For the first time in a very long time, I could feel the edges of my own desire, quietly burning, quietly waiting to be explored. The memory of her touch stayed with me long after I left the office, lingering on my skin and echoing through my mind with a clarity that felt almost dangerous. The days that followed moved slowly, each moment heavy with a kind of waiting. Routine took on a dreamlike quality. I went through the motions of home and family and responsibility, but there was a constant hum beneath everything, a new awareness that pulled me back into myself. I caught my own reflection in windows and mirrors and found a woman I barely recognized, softer around the eyes, more alert, as if I was finally watching my own life unfold instead of just living it on autopilot. I replayed that afternoon in my head over and over, not for answers, but to revisit the way I felt when I let myself respond without hesitation or apology. It wasn't just the physical touch, though that was a thread I tugged at again and again in memory. It was the look in her eyes, the invitation and the acceptance, the space she created for me to simply exist without justification. I wanted more of that space. I wanted to be brave enough to enter it fully, to stay there, even when everything familiar urged me to retreat. At home, I found myself standing by the window, watching the sunset, my body pressed against the glass as if I could dissolve into the golden light outside. My husband's voice floated in from another room, and I answered automatically, but my thoughts were elsewhere. I wondered if he could sense the change in me, the quiet restlessness that had taken root, and was slowly growing, reaching for light. As the days passed, the urge to see her again became stronger than any sense of decorum or propriety. I told myself I could invent a reason to return, some follow-up or clarification, but in truth, I didn't want a pretext. I wanted to be near her, to see if the intensity of that last encounter had been real or some trick of loneliness and hope. I dressed carefully, choosing clothes that made me feel both shielded and exposed, soft fabrics that reminded me of her hand on my skin. My heart pounded with every step as I approached the building, but I forced myself to move forward, refusing to shrink away from what I wanted. When I entered her office, the air felt different, thicker somehow, as if it remembered us. She looked up and smiled, not a polite professional smile, but one that softened her features and made me want to collapse into the space between us. I stood by the window, the same way I had in my own house, but here the tension was a live wire running just beneath the surface. She moved closer, not abruptly, but with the same gentle certainty she had shown before. The distance between us shrank to almost nothing. I felt my breath catch, my hands trembling at my sides, and for a moment I thought I would turn away, hide, pretend nothing was happening. Instead, I let myself stay open, let her see the longing and the confusion and the hope in my face. She didn't ask for words, didn't demand confession. She just waited, making room for whatever I needed to bring forward. With a slow exhale, I let myself acknowledge what I felt. The truth was simple, almost laughably so. I wanted her. I wanted the possibility she represented, the freedom I tasted in her presence. I wanted to step outside the safe, familiar patterns of my life and surrender to the unknown. The admission didn't feel shameful or reckless. It felt necessary, like a seed pushing through the earth, reaching for air. In the silence between us, the whole world shifted. I didn't need to explain, to justify, or to apologize. I only needed to feel what was real inside me and trust that she would hold it gently. She reached out again, her hand hovering just above mine, and I met her halfway. The contact was almost nothing, a brush of fingers, a mutual recognition, but it was enough. In that moment, I felt the tightness in my chest loosen, the years of self-denial begin to dissolve. We stood together in the quiet, two women letting the truth hang in the air, finally unafraid to see what would come next. The hours after that day unfurled in slow, radiant waves, each one carrying something strange and exhilarating and entirely new. I moved through my house with a sense of presence I hadn't felt in years, the afterglow of her touch and her attention blooming somewhere beneath my skin. The air seemed clearer, the walls less confining, as if I'd opened a window and let my real self drift back in on a current of possibility. Everything felt heightened. I lingered over the simple act of brushing my hair, noticing the weight and softness of each strand, how the movement stirred my senses. My reflection caught my eye in the hallway mirror, and instead of avoiding it, I let myself look, really look. I saw a woman whose face was still marked by the years, by habit and memory, but there was a vitality there, a brightness in the eyes and a fullness in the mouth I hadn't noticed in so long. That evening, I moved through my routine almost reverently, touching everything with more intention. The cool surface of the kitchen counter, the curve of a spoon in my hand, the soft fabric of the towel after a shower. Even the ordinary act of folding laundry felt like a small act of worship, a way of grounding myself in the here and now. My body felt alive, humming with a low, steady electricity. I found myself replaying every detail of our encounter, not just the moment our fingers met, but the tension that built between us, the way anticipation had colored the air, the invitation in her gaze that asked me to risk being more than I'd ever allowed myself to be. Later, when the house was finally quiet, I lay on my bed in the dark, the sheets cool against my skin. I let my hand rest on my stomach, feeling the gentle rise and fall of my breath, the flutter of nerves that still hadn't settled. My mind wandered, tracing the lines of memory, returning to the way she had looked at me, the heat of her body close to mine, the softness in her voice when she said my name. I closed my eyes and imagined her hand moving along my side, her breath warming my shoulder, the slow, deliberate way she allowed me to set the pace. In my imagination, I let the scenes play out as they might have if nothing had held me back, not even myself. I reached for myself with a kind of tenderness I hadn't shown in years, allowing my fingers to linger, to explore. I wasn't chasing release so much as trying to honor the fact that I was alive, that my body belonged to me again. I breathed deeply, savoring every sensation, following every ripple of pleasure, every shiver of anticipation. The world beyond my bedroom faded away. There was no husband in the next room, no expectations to meet, no roles to perform. Only me and the newfound courage humming in my blood. I came slowly, quietly, the pleasure spreading out in gentle waves, tears prickling at the corners of my eyes, not from sadness, but from relief, from a gratitude so deep it almost hurt. Sleep found me easily for the first time in ages. I woke before dawn, sunlight barely beginning to brush the horizon, and felt the soft ache of my muscles, the sated heaviness in my limbs. I stretched languidly, enjoying the way my body responded, warm and responsive, no longer numb or half-present. The morning unfolded with unexpected clarity. I moved through the motions of breakfast, the familiar tasks of coffee and eggs and toast, but everything felt subtly altered, brighter, more meaningful, as if each moment had been burnished with gold. I smiled at my own reflection in the toaster, at the silly joy of being awake, truly awake. As the day went on, I found myself seeking out small pleasures, the warmth of the sun through the kitchen window, the rich taste of ripe strawberries, the slow luxury of a hot bath in the middle of the afternoon. I didn't need an audience, didn't crave approval or reassurance. What I wanted was to stay close to this feeling, to nurture it, to protect it from the old doubts that so easily crept in. When I caught myself slipping into routine, I paused, took a deep breath, reminded myself that nothing was inevitable, that every moment could be chosen. I thought of her, often and without shame. Sometimes her presence seemed as real as the wind against my cheek, a reminder of what had been awakened in me. I remembered the steadiness of her gaze, the respectful patience in her movements, the way she gave me space to step forward or back as I needed. There was a gentleness in the memory that soothed the rough edges of my longing, that kept the ache from becoming pain. It wasn't just about desire, it was about being seen, being cherished, being allowed to take up space in my own life. In the quiet of evening, when the house was still and the sky outside deepened to indigo, I wrapped myself in a blanket and sat by the window, letting my mind drift. The past and future seemed to stretch out on either side of me, but I no longer felt caught between them. For the first time in years, I was content to simply be. I didn't know what would happen next, didn't need to map out every possibility or shield myself against disappointment. All I knew was that something inside me had shifted, that I could no longer pretend to be the woman I had been before. There was strength in that knowledge, a quiet confidence that grew with every breath, every heartbeat. I thought of the word rebirth, how it sounded both dramatic and inadequate for what I felt. This wasn't a transformation as much as a return to myself, to the parts of me I had silenced or forgotten. I felt the ache of it, the sweetness, the inevitable sorrow for all the lost time. But I also felt hope, bright and insistent, a steady light that refused to be dimmed. I promised myself that I would carry this forward, that I would not let it be a passing phase or a secret to hide. This was mine, my body, my desire, my life, and I intended to live it, every trembling, glorious, imperfect moment. Morning arrived softly, almost reverently, sunlight spilling through the curtains in slender lines across my bare arms. I lay still, listening to the hush that filled the house, feeling the subtle hum of energy beneath my skin. I stretched languidly, each movement a slow unraveling, and allowed myself the luxury of staying in bed for a few extra minutes, savoring the aftermath of everything that had changed. My body felt different now, looser, more open, not just from what had passed between us, but from the way I finally inhabited it again. The ache in my muscles was a gentle, living memory, and the steady rhythm of my breath seemed to synchronize with a deeper, newly awakened part of me. I slipped out of bed, moving through the house with a sense of ease, almost wonder. The old weight that had once followed me, guilt, expectation, self-doubt, was softer now, less able to cling. I moved to the kitchen, preparing breakfast in a kind of meditative silence, relishing the simple sensuality of hot water running over my hands, the aroma of coffee blooming in the air. Sunlight scattered across the table, the ordinary morning transformed into something intimate and sacred. I felt present for each small moment, each detail, and as I poured my coffee, I caught my reflection in the window and smiled, not with vanity or pride, but with quiet gratitude. There was a recognition there, an acceptance of the woman I saw. As the day unfurled, I dressed slowly, choosing clothes that felt soft against my skin, that suited me, not just the world's expectations. I looked at my body with new eyes, appreciating not only its resilience, but its capacity for joy and tenderness and pleasure. The familiar rituals, pulling a brush through my hair, touching perfume to my wrists, sliding into jeans, became small celebrations. I felt unhurried, unwilling to rush toward anything that might disturb the fragile peace I'd found. My phone buzzed with messages, reminders, fragments of the world outside, but I answered them with calm, no longer frantic to prove or please. There was a steadiness inside me, a sense of boundaries and worth that had been missing for too long. I ventured outside, feeling the air against my face, the shifting light on the sidewalk, the gentle press of the breeze through my clothes. Every sight, every sound felt sharper, richer, as if my senses had been wiped clean. I noticed things I used to overlook, the laughter of a child from an open window, the particular way sunlight illuminated the leaves, the faint hum of the city layered beneath birdsong. I was aware of people around me, but no longer compared myself to them. There was a space inside me, roomy and alive, a place for my own desires and thoughts and mistakes. I walked with my shoulders back, my strides certain, no longer shrinking from the world, but meeting it. Work felt different too. I answered questions with new confidence, my voice stronger, steadier, less afraid of being wrong or not enough. My colleagues' glances didn't unsettle me as they once had. I smiled easily, not to please, but because it felt natural. My laughter came more freely, sometimes surprising me with its brightness. I found myself saying yes to things I would have declined before, lunches, new projects, even small risks. The fear that used to keep me tethered to sameness had loosened its hold, replaced by curiosity, by a willingness to see what might happen if I stepped beyond the familiar. Later, at home, I opened the windows and let the air move through every room, as if to invite change to settle in. I played music as I cooked, letting my hips sway, letting my voice rise in song with the melody. I savored the flavors of dinner, noticing each taste, each texture, grateful for the abundance, for the simplicity. There was no pretense, no need to fill the silence with explanations or apologies. I ate slowly, mindful of hunger and satiety, attuned to my own needs, honoring them. Night fell gently, and I lit a candle in the living room, settling into the soft glow with a book, legs curled beneath me. The words on the page drew me in, but I kept pausing, lost in the feeling of contentment, in the miracle of simply being at ease. The future no longer frightened me the way it once had. I felt prepared to greet whatever came, to hold joy and pain and longing all at once, without letting any of it define me. I thought of her, of the way she had seen me and asked nothing except that I show up as myself. The memory was a comfort, a secret warmth I carried with me, no longer hidden or shameful, but cherished, a part of my story. As I readied for bed, I looked around at the familiar rooms and saw them differently, less as a backdrop for old habits and more as a canvas for new beginnings. I brushed my teeth, washed my face, all the while marveling at how these simple acts had become rituals of care. In the bedroom, I slipped beneath the covers, the sheets cool and clean against my skin, and drew a deep breath. My mind drifted, not with anxiety, but with anticipation, with the gentle hope of waking tomorrow to another day of freedom. Lying in the dark, I touched my heart and felt its steady beat, stronger than ever. I no longer measured myself by what I gave away, but by how wholly I lived. I had let myself break, and in the breaking, I had discovered a wild, irreducible freedom. My past did not vanish, nor did the wounds, but now I could hold them alongside my strength. I had come home to myself, and I would not leave again. I belonged, finally, to the one person I had always longed to be.